I'm with Raquel Ukeles from the National Library of Israel in their brand new building. When did you move into this new building?
We moved at the end of October 2023. That is, the actual move took about a year because we had to move about 4.5 million volumes and tens of millions of pages. But we were scheduled to open on October 17th, 2023. And then on October 7th, we realized that we had to shut all the parties down and we canceled all the events. There were hundreds of people coming from all over the world to these events that we had planned for literally years. But on October 7th, the whole world changed here. And so we canceled those events and we pivoted to getting the building open for the public. And so we were able to do that 3 weeks later.
And this should have been a celebration time, and it was a time of sadness instead. That must have been very, very hard.
You know, it was hard, but I have to say I have tremendous admiration for my colleagues and for the leadership of the library, that they made that decision very quickly, and then they moved forward. They were sober about it, and this is an institution that's very, very committed to public service, and they understood that there was a need in the public to get the building open, and that took precedence over the extravaganzas.
How many books do you have here in the library?
So we have about 4.5 million volumes, which includes books and what we call periodicals. That's like newspapers and journals and magazines. And then we have thousands of archives. Each archive can have anywhere between a few hundred to tens of thousands of pages. We have a huge music collection of Jewish and Israeli music, about 60,000 digital hours. That means it's all been digitized. And we have terabytes on terabytes of digital material. And that could be ebooks today. We've been archiving the Israeli internet since the beginning of the internet over 20 years ago. And a tremendous amount of material both here and around the world that we have scanned to make available, because our goals are to be the most comprehensive collection of Israeli heritage, as broadly defined as possible, and Jewish heritage, also as broadly defined as possible. And so, for example, when it comes to Jewish culture, so Jews produced cultural material in almost every place on earth over the last few thousand years, and so that material resides in, we've actually counted over 1,200 institutions around the world. And so what we've done since the 50s, actually, of the previous century, is that we've reached out and formed cooperation agreements with them to preserve this information, this material, and we keep a copy here at the library. And so that's why our digital collections are so rich and robust. Mm-hmm. That's true about what are called manuscripts, right, the handwritten materials, and also historical newspapers.
Do you have many valuable books here?
We do. We have over 100,000 items that we call rare, and rare is defined by us. Either it was created before 1700, or it's unique in the world in some significant way, or represents a kind of marginal group that needs to be protected. I can give you an example. There's a newspaper in Israel called Al-Ittihad, which was created by the Communist Party in this country, and it was started in 1944, in April 1944. It's the only Arabic newspaper that survived that transition from pre-state to the State of Israel and continues till today. And so I personally took the first issue of that newspaper and I put it into our rare vault, because that's a historically important piece of material.
Israel obviously is at war at the moment. Did you have to put some of your very valuable books into protection because of the war?
So our rare book and manuscript vault is many floors beneath the ground, and it was built to withstand many kinds of assaults and attacks. And so our material is hopefully safe. That being said, we have in this new building space for exhibitions, and there were about 200 items that were original materials, ancient manuscripts, important archival documents, and they were in position on October 6th for this grand opening. And then on October 7th, I have several very brave colleagues who came here in the middle of 12 missile attacks on Jerusalem, and they took all 200 items down to the vaults. Since then, it took a few months before we felt it was secure enough here in Jerusalem to bring back the materials, and then they've gone back down twice with the 2 Iranian attacks on the country. And so we see our roles as stewards, cultural guardians of this material. We don't feel like it belongs to this institution. It belongs to the country. It belongs to Jewish culture, to world culture. And so we're trying to find that balance between enabling the public to come close and enjoy the encounters with this extraordinary material, and also preserving it for coming generations.
What other projects do you do here in the library?
Where do we start? We have so many projects going on in all directions. We have projects. I head the team of collection curators, and so we have continual projects to build the collections. Our collections are very dynamic and constantly growing, and so I referenced the archiving the internet. So we have a number of projects related to how do you capture culture and society today, right? We live in a time where it's not about finding that one precious document. We're inundated with material and information, even radio and podcasts. And so we have built a project to collect and to think about what is the policy around what material should we be collecting on an ongoing basis, both here in Israel and in Jewish communities around the world. Of course, we have a very challenging, important, but very challenging and difficult project since October 7th, and that is to build a massive archive of all documentation materials connected to October 7th and during this period of war. And the goal is for us to collect directly all kinds of documentary materials, and I'll give a few examples. But we're also working with hundreds of grassroots initiatives that started in this country already on October 7th and the days afterwards, of people who understood that we're living through seismic events in Israeli history and that we have to capture that material before it disappears. There's a funny thing about new material, new media, digital material, and that is it's much more ephemeral than a book. A book is actually very, very stable. We have books from 1,000 years ago or more, but an internet site or, a WhatsApp or an instant messaging message that can capture a really important, authentic moment in a terrible event like October 7th, that disappears within months and definitely within years. And so we're collecting ourselves, we're collecting a tremendous amount of oral testimonies from October 7th. We got 200,000 videos from October 7th that were collected or were downloaded actually from Hamas accounts. So we have the videos, the GoPro cameras from Hamas. We also have witnesses and bystanders who also filmed. We're collecting a whole array of cultural material, diaries and songs and prayers, tremendous amount of religious material that's been produced both around October 7th and throughout this past year, using traditional styles, primarily Jewish styles, but reinterpreting them to meet the needs of this tremendous sorrow and anguish and fear that is in Israeli society today. In addition, we are collecting material from Jewish communities around the world, including from England and all the different European countries, to make sure that we can enable people, not just in our time, but in coming generations, to have a 360-degree perspective on this material. I'll add to that we are actively collecting Arabic material from this time period, both the experience of Arabs, the Arab citizens of this country, and also Palestinian discourse, again, so that this is about building the historical record, so that coming generations who want to understand what happened, things that are intuitive for you and me right now because we're living through it, but in 50, 100 years, they won't understand many dimensions of this. And so we're all the time thinking, how can we create enough of a record so that coming generations will be able to understand?
Where do you get all this information from?
So the material we're collecting directly, either we're downloading it from the internet and social media, as much as we can. There are proprietary issues around social media because it belongs to private companies, and so we have certain tools, and we're in conversation with some of those companies to help us collect it. We've put out a lot of calls to the public who have shared material with us, people who wrote diaries, for example. So if we hear of a diary, or we hear of a memorial book being produced, or a website that's being produced, so there's like a push-pull. Sometimes we will go out, and sometimes people will come to us. And then there are over 30 initiatives that are collecting oral testimonials. For example, the largest is called Edut 710. Edut means Testimony 710, and it's a remarkable collective of over 400 volunteers, filmmakers, and archivists and data scientists who have built a huge archive of oral video testimonials from October 7th. I'll just mention another important partner of ours because it's so unique, and that is another one. It's called Memorial 710, and that's an organization that is collecting the WhatsApp messages. WhatsApp here is the primary way that people communicate, and it's an instant messaging technology that the people who were in the South, they documented themselves moment to moment what they were experiencing. And so it's the most authentic documentation material. And so we are working with them, and they've collected so far over 1,000 WhatsApp messages from over 30 communities in the South, and they will be giving it to copies to the library. Those are just a few examples of the kind of material, in addition to, of course, books and posters and music and a whole array of material. This is just the beginning of a 5-year project. The goal is to build a platform that will be searchable, and we are working to try to deal with very complicated and sensitive privacy matters around people who have gone through trauma, including really interesting and difficult questions about what do you do about children who were witnesses and gave testimonies. To what degree are we protecting these children? Or we've been given advice by experts in the field on what does it mean to protect a child, and that is not to erase their experiences, but to actually incorporate their experiences into this archive. And so this project has taken us to all sorts of challenging places, including new media. I mentioned podcasts we're archiving for the first time, or WhatsApp messages. There are all these privacy interesting issues. And because we're dealing with so much material, the numbers sound insane. We've collected over 34 terabytes of material. We're talking about hundreds of millions of documents. And so we're using a lot of new technologies, artificial intelligence, that will help us to extract what is the data, what is the information we need in order to make this into a usable archive. So that what that means is that if you have a video, then AI can identify the faces and the places so that a person doesn't have to sit and watch 200,000 of these horrible videos, these horrifying films, so they can get the information about how to catalog and how to record all this material, so it's not just a massive chaos, but it can become the historical record for coming generations.
I understand as well you have stickers from the site of the Nova Festival.
We have stickers from all over this country. Stickers, it's funny because it seems like a kind of retro type of material, right? It's not social media. It's a very, it's something from, maybe even a generation or two ago. But what has started in this country is that people, the families and friends of people who were killed, whether it's civilians from October 7th or people who were killed in the Nova Festival, or soldiers who have fallen in battle. So their family and friends have created these stickers. They tend to be long, wide and pretty small, and with the picture of the person with a kind of motto or mantra of the person. And we find these stickers everywhere in the country. And not just in this country. We've been told that Israelis who are traveling to other countries, they want to bring their loved ones with them. And so they put a sticker of their boyfriend or girlfriend or family member on their backpack, and when they trek into the Himalayas.
How many books have been published since October the 7th?
As you can imagine, we're just at the beginning. We've collected probably about 140 books so far, but every week we're getting more. And so you'll have to come back to me in a few years and I'll be able to give you a more accurate number. People are still publishing books. Some of the books are memorial books, friends and family who will gather materials. Often they discover aspects of the person who was killed, and so they publish their writings, their songs or poetry or their diaries. And then you have many kinds of books that collect stories. Like there's like 101 stories from October 7th as one example. And so we're seeing many different kinds of books. And then, of course, as we move away from the events, we're going to see more and more analysis of October 7th in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in the context of the history of Israel, And so the more we move away from October 7th in terms of our timeline, and also so many other events have happened since then, so it's going to shift the way that people think about the set of events. I'll just share one example of why we're in process. Like this is a conversation that will sound different even in a few months from now. A colleague of mine from this Edut 710, we were on a panel together in a conference, and she shared that in their experience, those WhatsApp messages that I described, that this is an event that maybe is going on in Ukraine or other conflicts today, but it's an event that the people who are going through the experience are documenting the experience as it happens. And so a person who was sitting in a bomb shelter for 20 hours, terrified, and is interacting with people in their world who are asking and desperate to find out information about them. So they're producing a record, a moment-to-moment record. Then when that person gives an oral testimony, even 6 months or 12 months down the line, they go back to their own record. And so it anchors these stories in what happened on that day, October 7th. That's very different from getting the testimony of a victim of a catastrophe or massacre who only starts to share their story 20 years down the line, right? It's changing the nature of how people tell their stories, this world that we're living in.
Are you going to want to use this material that you're collecting to be something like Yad Vashem as a memorial, or just to actually archive it?
So in Israel today, there are many discussions around this question of what will be the body that will be the memorial body. A library is not a place, it's not a memorial. That's not our role. And it's been very important throughout this whole process to keep these distinctions clear. And that is, our job is to create the historical record. That means we collect a lot of memorial materials, but we're not a place that does the memorial ourselves. I'll give you an exception to that, what I'm about to say in a moment. And so that is, I imagine that there will be an institution that will be created like a Yad Vashem, but it's not here at the library. In addition, because this wasn't one massacre, this was many massacres that took place across many different communities. Each community is already building their own memorial. So for example, in the city of Sderot, they have already built their memorial. Now that's remarkable how quickly they were able to build it, but they did that because I think they feel a lot of pressure, both from internal tourists and solidarity missions that are coming from Europe and America who want to come see. And so they move very quickly. Normally these processes, again, they take decades, but now everything is sped up. And so the role of the library is we're not going to become Yad Vashem, but we are working with partners. All the institutions of heritage institutions in this country are our partners. Together we are building one digital archive, and the digital archive can sit anywhere. It's not bricks and mortar.
I imagine it's been very emotional doing all of this.
It's been extraordinarily difficult to do this work. Maybe I'll just share an anecdote. It's become so much part of our daily life that I don't even realize to what degree it affects me. And so, there I was a few days ago sitting and reviewing video testimonials, and my husband was sitting next to me, and all of a sudden he looked up to me. He said, "How are you doing this?" And it's just become so much a part of our work that I think we've developed a kind of, I don't know if it's an armor or a capacity to deal with very difficult materials. That being said, from the beginning of this project, we put into place access to therapists for our team, because especially those people who have to really sit day by day and go through these materials, that's excruciating. And so we want to make sure that everyone who's working on this project has some way to get help if they desire.
What sort of people come and visit the library?
The library is one of the few places in the country that belongs to everyone. You can actually compare it to the library, maybe some of the museums, but really I wouldn't even put the museums in that category, the zoo, the mall, the hospital. Israel is a place that has so many different communities, whether religious or ethnic or national communities, but unfortunately it can be a pretty polarized in terms of where people, move around. The library aspires to be the place that everyone feels comfortable. And in the last year, we have seen about 250,000 people who have come to this library, which for a country that's, about 9 million people, 10 million people, that's a huge amount of people to come to a library, right? Because we have succeeded in building an inviting open space where many different cultures are represented here. For example, all over the library you'll see 3 languages, English, Hebrew, and Arabic. In our exhibitions you see beautiful Christian manuscripts and Islamic manuscripts and many different, Jewish practices. And in our reading rooms we have many different cultures, and I once asked our head of cataloging that we have over 380 languages represented in our catalogs. So who comes here? You have different types of people. You have the users of the library, and they span from, middle school children who need access to a book to, world-renowned scholars. And it makes us very happy to see different populations who come to the library. You have visitors who, for the first time, because the library now has facilities and has a wonderful cafe, and so they can so people come here as a kind of like intellectual entertainment, and they'll come to the library. In the summer, we have children's festivals. Throughout the year, we have popular music performances, and we have, intellectually rigorous conferences, and we try to have the whole gamut here. That's what the library's aim is. Just what does that mean to be a national library? And that is to serve all different aspects of the public. Just at the end of this month, we're going to have a symposium on Bedouin culture, because we have collected 4 collections of Bedouin oral history and music and photographs, and we're going to have a performance of Bedouin music and dance. But the day before we have on Israeli Hebrew music, and then the day after we'll have on other languages and other cultures, and that's what's exciting about the library. And of course we have a phenomenal educational program where we have tens of thousands of students and teachers that come to this to library to learn all the different skills you need of how to do research and how to present your research and how to work together as teams and in groups. And so it's just a wonderfully thriving place that can be the best of what, a culture and a democratic culture should be.
For those people who would love to come to Israel but can't, they can find out a lot of material on the internet. What's your website for people who'd like to know more?
Thank you. It's www.nli.org.il.
Okay, Raquel, thank you very much.
Thank you.